The alien ships loomed above Earth like ominous shadows, blotting out the sun as they descended. Flames danced across the horizon, and explosions shook the ground as the invaders pressed their assault on the world below. For days, the skies had been filled with the relentless sound of war, humanity's defenses crumbling under the weight of the alien onslaught. Entire cities had been wiped off the map, and what little remained of the human resistance was scattered, broken, and fighting a battle they had no hope of winning. Aboard one of the command ships, the alien Conqueror surveyed the destruction below with a sense of satisfaction. His armor gleamed, advanced beyond anything Earth had ever conceived. His cold, calculating eyes scanned the remains of Earth's forces, barely amused by what he saw. It was pathetic. These humans, clinging to outdated technology, still believed they could resist. As if their primitive tanks, their guns, their bombs could even begin to make a dent in the might of the universe's most advanced military. One of the lieutenants approached, bowing slightly. "The final stronghold is in the mountains, my lord. Their forces are small, barely a handful of soldiers remain." The Conqueror's lips curled into a sneer. "Let them fight," he said. "Their death will come soon enough." Far below, at the base of a towering mountain, the last human outpost was preparing for what everyone knew would be the final battle. The ancient fortress had once stood as a symbol of strength, built centuries ago by men who believed it would protect them from invaders. Today, that belief felt like little more than a cruel joke. Yet here, among the few remaining soldiers, there was still a sense of purpose, a glimmer of hope, no matter how foolish it seemed. One soldier stood apart from the rest. His armor was dented, scratched, and far from the pristine state it had once been in. He was a relic of a war that had long passed, a fighter who had seen more battles than he cared to remember. His name was forgotten by many, but to his men, he was simply known as the captain. As the alien forces began their slow advance, the captain stood at the edge of the fortress wall, watching them with a calm that bordered on unsettling. The sky darkened as the ships drew closer, their engines humming with a low, menacing growl. He glanced down at his armor, a relic in its own right. It wasn't like the sleek, shining suits the aliens wore. It was old, scarred by battles long since fought. But it had kept him alive this long, and that was enough. "Captain," one of the younger soldiers called out, breathless from running up the steep stone steps. "The aliens, they've landed." The captain didn't turn to face the young man. "I know," he said simply. The tension was thick. Below, the alien troops disembarked, marching forward with the precision of machines. Their armor glistened in the fading light, their weapons pulsing with energy unknown to human technology. They moved with the confidence of a predator closing in on its cornered prey. The captain could see the alien Conqueror at the center of it all, standing tall, wrapped in his superior armor, untouched by the chaos around him. It was clear that the Conqueror considered this battle nothing more than a formality, the final nail in Earth's coffin. A smile of disdain spread across the alien's face as his eyes settled on the human defenders. His gaze focused on the captain, standing at the front lines, his worn armor a stark contrast to the gleaming perfection of the alien invaders. With a flick of his wrist, the Conqueror activated a communication channel, his voice booming across the battlefield. "Is this what you humans call a defense?" he mocked. "Look at you, clinging to your ancient armor, your broken technology. You are nothing. Your world is finished." The captain said nothing, his eyes never leaving the Conqueror. The other soldiers shifted uneasily, but he remained still, unshaken. "Do you really believe that this scrap metal will protect you from us?" The Conqueror continued, his voice laced with contempt. "Your time is over. Your species is weak. You've already lost, you just refuse to admit it." The soldiers beside the captain looked at him, waiting for a response, but he gave none. The Conqueror's arrogance was nothing new. They had all heard it before, and it didn't change the reality of what was about to happen. The air grew thick with anticipation as the alien forces began their advance. Weapons hummed to life, their barrels glowing with energy. The captain watched, his grip tightening around his rifle. Behind him, the remaining human soldiers prepared for the inevitable clash. Some muttered prayers, Others tightened the straps on their armor, but all knew the chances of survival were slim. Still, they stood. Not because they believed they could win, but because there was no other choice. As the first wave of alien troops reached the base of the mountain, the captain raised his hand. "Hold," he said quietly. His men obeyed, though they could hear the tremors in the ground as the aliens closed in. The Conqueror watched with amusement as the humans stood their ground, seemingly oblivious to the overwhelming force approaching them. He activated his communicator again, this time directing it to his troops. "Break them," he commanded. "End this." At his order, the alien soldiers surged forward, their weapons lighting up the sky. Energy beams tore through the air, ripping apart the earth in front of the human lines. The captain's soldiers returned fire, their bullets pinging harmlessly off the alien armor, barely slowing them down. "No!" the captain muttered under his breath. With a roar, the human defenders unleashed their full arsenal, missiles and explosives lighting up the night as they aimed for the advancing horde. For a moment, it looked as though they had managed to hold their own, the alien troops faltering as explosions rocked their ranks. But it wasn't enough. The aliens adapted quickly, their superior technology cutting through the human defenses like a knife through butter. The captain's armor took hit after hit, each blast pushing him back a step, but he remained standing, refusing to fall. The alien conqueror watched from his perch, still amused, still mocking. "You humans never learn," he said, shaking his head. "You can't fight progress with relics of the past." The captain gritted his teeth, his eyes scanning the horizon. There was something stirring beneath the earth. A rumble, faint but unmistakable, echoed through the mountain. He could feel it beneath his feet, an ancient power waking from its long slumber. The Conqueror had no idea what was coming. The alien forces advanced with the precision of a machine, their energy weapons lighting up the battlefield in a blaze of destruction. The captain and his men fought with everything they had, but it was like trying to hold back a flood with their bare hands. The air was thick with smoke, the ground shaking with every explosion, and the screams of the wounded filled the sky. Despite the chaos, the captain remained calm, his eyes focused on the approaching enemy. Each step forward was a struggle. His armor, already battered from previous battles, was now barely holding together. The joints were stiff, the plating cracked in multiple places. He felt every impact from the alien weapons, each one driving him back, forcing him to fight harder just to stay upright. His rifle had run out of ammunition long ago, and now he was down to using a battered sidearm, firing shots that barely slowed the alien troops as they advanced. His men were scattered, some of them dead, others barely holding the line. The alien conqueror watched from a distance, still confident in his victory. Every time the captain's armor took another hit, he could feel the conqueror's mocking gaze on him, as if he were nothing more than an amusing sideshow in this final battle. The captain knew they couldn't hold out much longer. The aliens were relentless, their superior weapons cutting through human defenses with ease. Every defense they had was crumbling, and for every alien soldier they managed to take down, two more seemed to take their place. The alien conqueror didn't even need to lift a finger. His forces were more than enough to finish the job. But despite the overwhelming odds, the captain fought on. His every breath was labored, his body aching under the weight of his broken armor, but he refused to fall. He fired shot after shot, even as the alien energy blast chipped away at the ground around him. His men followed his lead, their resolve never breaking, even as the enemy drew closer. The conqueror's voice rang out again, this time directed at the captain himself. "Why do you continue this pointless resistance? You're only delaying the inevitable. Your world is lost. You are lost." The captain didn't respond, his attention locked on the task at hand. The alien's words were nothing more than noise. He had fought for too long, seen too much, to let arrogance get the better of him. The enemy didn't understand. This wasn't about winning. It had never been about that. It was about standing tall, refusing to bow, even in the face of certain defeat. It was about showing these invaders what humanity was made of. Another barrage of energy beams tore through the battlefield, and the captain's legs nearly gave out as one struck close by, sending a shockwave through his armor. His hands gripped his sidearm tighter, refusing to let go. His ears rang from the explosion, his vision blurring as the smoke thickened. It was then that he felt it again, that strange, almost imperceptible rumble beneath his feet. It was faint, but unmistakable. The ground was alive with a growing energy, something ancient and powerful stirring beneath the surface. The captain's instincts flared, his body reacting before his mind had fully processed what was happening. There was something here. Something more than just the fortress, more than just the mountain itself. It was as if the earth was trying to wake up, to shake off centuries of slumber. And the captain could feel it. A pulse, rhythmic and growing stronger with each passing second. He couldn't explain it, but somehow he knew that whatever was coming, it would change the course of the battle. His gaze swept across the battlefield, where his men were still fighting desperately, refusing to give an inch to the invaders. The alien forces pressed closer, their weapons relentless, and he could see the exhaustion on the faces of his soldiers. They were close to breaking, but none of them had given up. They wouldn't give up. Not as long as they still had breath in their lungs. The captain knew what he had to do. Holstering his sidearm, he planted his feet firmly in the ground, his hands pressing against the cold earth beneath him. The vibrations were stronger now, like a heartbeat echoing from deep within the mountain. He closed his eyes, letting the sensation wash over him, trying to understand what it was that he was feeling. This power, it wasn't just random. It had a purpose. And somehow, he was connected to it. The Conqueror's voice cut through the noise again, filled with derision. "Is this your final act of defiance, human? Kneeling before the inevitable? Pathetic." But the captain wasn't listening. His focus was entirely on the energy pulsing through the ground. The air around him seemed to change, growing heavier, more electric. And then, just as suddenly as the feeling had come, it hit him, a roar, so deep and powerful that it seemed to shake the very bones of the earth itself. His eyes snapped open, and in the distance he saw it. The ground cracked, splitting open with a thunderous sound. From the heart of the mountain, something ancient and terrible was waking up. The air shimmered with heat, the smoke curling into the sky as the cracks in the earth widened. And then, in one blinding moment of light and fury, it emerged. The dragon. Its roar echoed across the battlefield, drowning out the sound of the alien weapons, the screams of the soldiers, and even the Conqueror's mocking voice. Its scales glistened in the light, a deep, iridescent green that shimmered with the glow of molten lava beneath its skin. Massive wings unfurled, casting a shadow over the battlefield as it rose to its full height. The alien forces, once so confident in their victory, hesitated. The Conqueror's amusement disappeared, replaced by confusion and something that almost resembled fear. The dragon's presence was undeniable, its power radiating across the battlefield in waves. It was a force of nature, raw and untamed, and it had awakened to defend its land. The captain felt a surge of energy flow through him, as if the dragon's presence had reignited a fire within his soul. His armor, broken and battered, seemed insignificant in the face of this ancient power. But it didn't matter. He had something far greater on his side now. Without a word, the captain stood tall, his gaze fixed on the alien forces ahead. The dragon let out another roar, shaking the ground beneath them, and the captain knew this battle was far from over. The dragon's roar reverberated through the mountains, shaking the very earth beneath their feet. The alien soldiers, once advancing with the cold precision of conquerors, now faltered, their formations wavering as they stared at the colossal beast before them. The massive creature towered over the battlefield, its scales glowing like molten stone, its eyes burning with a fierce intelligence. Its wings spread wide, casting a long shadow over the alien ranks. For the first time, the captain saw uncertainty flicker across the face of the alien conqueror. The arrogance that had been so palpable moments ago was gone, replaced by something far more human, fear. It was a subtle shift, but it was there. The conqueror's eyes, previously filled with disdain, now darted back and forth between the dragon and his own troops, as if calculating whether his advanced technology could overcome this new threat. The captain, still bruised and battered from the fight, felt an undeniable surge of hope. He knew the alien Conqueror had not expected this, had not even considered the possibility that Earth had something beyond mere human technology to offer in defense. The dragon had been here long before humans, long before any of them. It was a force that the Conqueror, for all his superiority, had failed to account for. With a powerful sweep of its wings, the dragon took to the air, its massive form rising above the battlefield. Fire erupted from its jaws, a torrent of searing heat that rained down on the alien forces. Their shields, once impervious to human weapons, buckled under the force of the dragon's flames. The front lines of the alien army crumbled, soldiers scattering as their technology failed them. The invincibility they had once boasted seemed like a distant memory now, swallowed by the raw power of the dragon. The Conqueror barked orders, his voice strained, demanding his forces regroup. He watched as his once unstoppable troops scrambled for cover, their sleek armor now nothing more than fragile shells against the dragon's fury. The skies, once dominated by alien craft, were now filled with the terrifying presence of the ancient beast. The Conqueror's expression hardened, no longer amused but determined, as he raised his arm to signal an all-out attack. In an instant, alien ships descended from the clouds, their weapons charging. Beams of energy shot toward the dragon, lighting up the sky with violent flashes. The beast roared in defiance, its body twisting in the air as it dodged the worst of the attacks. Those that struck its hide, however, seemed to do little more than irritate the creature. The dragon retaliated with a ferocious sweep of its tail, smashing one of the alien ships from the sky in a single blow. The captain watched as the tide of the battle shifted before his eyes. The dragon's presence had turned what seemed like inevitable defeat into a brutal and chaotic struggle. The alien forces, once so sure of their dominance, were now fighting for survival. The captain, emboldened by the dragon's arrival, picked up a fallen rifle from one of his fallen comrades and charged forward, rallying the remaining human soldiers behind him. As he led the charge, the captain fired into the disoriented alien ranks, his movements quick and precise. His men followed suit, their spirits lifted by the sight of the dragon tearing through the enemy lines. The alien Conqueror, still commanding from afar, watched in disbelief as the human forces, fueled by their newfound hope, fought with a ferocity he had never anticipated. The dragon, sensing the growing strength of the humans, let out another deafening roar before diving into the heart of the alien army. Its claws ripped through their advanced machinery as if it were nothing more than paper. The ground shook as it landed among the alien forces, crushing their armor and weapons beneath its massive frame. Flames engulfed the alien ranks, reducing their once unstoppable war machines to molten wreckage. But the alien Conqueror was not so easily defeated. With a grim determination, he activated the full might of his remaining forces. The air crackled with energy as dozens of alien ships descended upon the battlefield, each one unleashing a barrage of firepower aimed directly at the dragon. The beast roared in pain as the concentrated assault slammed into its body, but it did not retreat. Instead, it fought back with renewed fury, its fire breath incinerating the ships before they could land a killing blow. Despite the dragon's overwhelming strength, the captain could see that it was taking damage. The alien technology, while no match for the dragon's raw power, was still formidable in its own right. The alien forces were throwing everything they had at the creature, and slowly, the dragon's movements began to slow, its roars growing more ragged. The captain's heart raced. He knew that they couldn't afford to lose the dragon now, not after it had turned the tide of the battle. He needed to end this, and quickly. His gaze shifted to the alien Conqueror, still standing at a distance, watching the carnage with cold eyes. The Conqueror had been the architect of this invasion, the one who had unleashed hell on Earth. If he could be defeated, the rest of the alien forces might crumble. Summoning the last of his strength, the captain sprinted toward the Conqueror, dodging the chaotic melee around him. The path was littered with debris and the bodies of both human and alien soldiers. His breath came in ragged gasps, his body screaming in protest, but he pressed on. The alien Conqueror noticed him too late. The captain raised his weapon, firing a volley of shots at the Conqueror's chest. The Conqueror's armor absorbed the blows, but the impact knocked him off balance. He stumbled backward, momentarily disoriented. The captain seized the opportunity, closing the distance between them. With a final burst of energy, he slammed into the Conqueror, knocking him to the ground. The two struggled, the alien's superior strength almost overwhelming the captain, but he held on, refusing to let go. With a swift movement, the captain yanked a blade from his belt and plunged it into the small gap in the Conqueror's armor, just beneath the ribs. The alien let out a sharp gasp, his body going rigid as the blade pierced through his flesh. The captain pulled back, breathing heavily as the alien Conqueror slumped to the ground, his life draining away. The battlefield around them fell silent as the alien forces, seeing their leader fall, hesitated. The dragon, sensing the shift, let out one final, victorious roar, its wings beating against the sky as it ascended once more, flames still trailing from its mouth. The captain, exhausted and battered, stood over the fallen Conqueror. The once mighty alien, who had mocked humanity and its defenders, now lay lifeless at his feet. The captain glanced toward the sky, where the dragon circled above, its powerful presence a reminder of the strength and resilience that had saved them all. This was the moment that would be remembered, the day humanity had stood its ground, against all odds, and fought back with everything it had. The alien Conqueror had underestimated the will of the human spirit, and the ancient forces that had long protected this world. In the end, it had been his undoing. The battlefield lay in quiet ruin. The echoes of war had faded, replaced by an eerie silence as the dragon soared overhead, its enormous wings cutting through the air with a slow, rhythmic beat. Below, the remains of the alien forces littered the ground, charred, shattered, and scattered among the rubble. Alien ships, once a symbol of unstoppable power, lay smoking in craters where the dragon's flames had melted them into molten wrecks. The air was thick with the scent of burnt metal and scorched earth. The captain stood still for a moment, breathing in the heavy, smoke-filled air. His body ached, every bruise and burn making itself known now that the battle had finally ended. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear or exhaustion, but from the weight of everything that had just happened. He had survived, and more than that, humanity had survived. Against all odds, they had stood their ground, and now the invaders were broken, their leader dead at his feet. But victory had come at a price. Too many of his men lay motionless on the field, the cost of their defiance written in their stillness. The remaining human soldiers gathered, their expressions filled with a mixture of relief and disbelief. 4 days, weeks even, they had fought with the understanding that their chances of survival were slim to none. Yet here they were, alive, standing among the wreckage of an alien invasion that should have wiped them out. They looked to the captain, the one who had led them through it all, their eyes asking the question he already knew the answer to, what now? The captain exhaled slowly. There was no celebration in him, no sense of triumph. He simply nodded at the men, wordlessly acknowledging their shared survival. The dragon, their unlikeliest ally, had saved them. It had been the force that turned the tide, something the alien Conqueror had never expected, something not even the captain had fully understood until it had revealed itself. The beast, ancient and powerful, was unlike anything humanity could have imagined. The dragon circled above once more before descending toward the mountains, its massive form landing with a gentle grace that seemed impossible for something so large. It watched them for a moment, its glowing eyes scanning the battlefield as if assessing what had been saved. There was an intelligence there, something far older and wiser than anything human. The captain met the dragon's gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. They had fought together, but now the dragon's task was done. Without a sound, the creature turned and moved back toward the jagged peaks of the mountain range, disappearing into the mist and shadows from where it had come. The earth seemed to breathe a sigh of relief as it departed, as though the natural order was being restored. The captain knew they would likely never see the dragon again, and that was as it should be. Some forces were not meant to be commanded or controlled. They came when they were needed, and then they returned to their slumber. The soldiers began to move among the wreckage, checking for any sign of survivors, both human and alien. The aftermath of the battle was a sobering reminder of the brutality of war. The cost had been high, but in the end, humanity had held its ground. The alien forces, without their leader and with their technology in ruins, would not be able to mount another attack. Not today, and not for a long time. The captain, weary beyond measure, walked among his men, offering quiet words of encouragement. There was no need for speeches. They had all seen enough death and destruction for a lifetime. But in the eyes of the survivors, there was something new, a spark of hope. They had stood against a force that should have crushed them, and they had won. For the first time in days, they allowed themselves to believe that there might be a future beyond the battlefield. As the hours passed, the reality of what had happened began to sink in. Earth was free. The alien Conqueror's invasion had been stopped, not by superior technology or strategy, but by the unbreakable will of the human spirit, and by a force as ancient as the world itself. The captain knew that there would be questions, debates, and endless analysis in the days to come. The leaders of Earth's remaining nations would want to know how they had won, how a dragon had come to their aid, and what it meant for the future. But for now, none of that mattered. What mattered was that they had survived. The captain found a moment of quiet away from the others, his body finally allowing itself to feel the full weight of his exhaustion. He sat on a chunk of broken stone, his eyes scanning the distant mountains where the dragon had disappeared. He couldn't help but wonder about the stories that would be told about this day, about the myths that would surely grow around what had just happened. History would remember the victory, but few would truly understand the sacrifice, the fear, and the determination it had taken to achieve it. A low rumble echoed in the distance, a reminder that the world was still in turmoil. There would be much rebuilding to do, much to repair. Cities had been leveled, lives shattered, and Earth would not soon forget the scars left by the alien invasion. But it was a scar they could heal from, now that the immediate threat had been extinguished. The captain stood, the aches and pains of the battle still fresh in his bones, but his resolve unwavering. He knew that they would rebuild, just as they always had. Humanity was resilient. It had been tested time and time again, and each time it had emerged stronger. They would rise from the ashes of this war, not because they had the most advanced technology, but because of something far deeper, far older. The human spirit had always been their greatest weapon. And now, as the dust began to settle, that spirit burned brighter than ever. The survivors gathered their fallen comrades, their movements slow but purposeful. There would be time to grieve, time to mourn those who had given everything. But for now, they worked in silence, their minds focused on the task at hand. The captain joined them, his hands steady as he helped carry the bodies of his brothers in arms, each step a reminder of the price they had paid for victory. As the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting the battlefield in a deep orange glow, the captain allowed himself one final glance at the mountains. The dragon was gone, but its presence lingered, like the echo of a roar that would never truly fade. In the distance, the last alien ships retreated into the stars, beaten and broken. And though the captain knew that this would not be the last time humanity faced a threat from beyond, he also knew that when the time came, they would be ready. They had faced the impossible, and they had won.